Thanks everybody for joining this webinar. We're excited about this topic and the speakers we've brought together today, as well as the partnership between our various organizations. So we're going to talk about trees kind of throughout their life cycle. And I like the photo on the left is one we just took. That's from the Elmira Nature Reserve, where they cleared out a bunch of buckthorn. And you can kind of see if you squint, there's a bunch of new saplings planted there. And in the background is actually 3 elm trees that were found and discovered, which are rare finds indeed nowadays. So that's kind of cool. I thought it was a nice sort of metaphor for what we want to talk about today. So before we get going, so I do want to thank all of the organizations that help make this partner together and make this webinar possible. Guelph Urban Forest Friends, the Guelph chapter of Tree Trust, who you'll hear presentations with later on tonight, and Nature Guelph, who helped us promote this webinar as well. And I'll put a bit of a plug in for, I know Nature Guelph has a upcoming workshop themselves at the Guelph Arboretum. So if you go to their website, it's during National Forest Week. It looks really cool. So, so maybe I'll see you there. Also want to thank the City of Guelph. Without their funding, this webinar wouldn't have been possible. They've been a great partner, and they've also helped to fund some of our programs in the community for Guelphites, which I'll touch a little bit on, but helping to make our environment a little bit more sustainable and the community a little more sustainable. So to set the stage, I'd like to take a moment here to open up with a territorial acknowledgement. One of the most important aspects of our conversation here tonight is understanding how to be better stewards of our land and the water, as you can see, and the impact that our decisions have on the wider community. The actions that we take on our own properties contribute to the overall health of our shared watershed and the health of the wildlife that inhabit this area. We acknowledge that the Grand River watershed, including its tributaries like the Speed and Aramosa rivers, are located on the traditional territory of the indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We recognize the enduring presence of the indigenous people that we share this land with today and their contributions to our community. We value their traditional knowledge about how to live sustainably on this land that we share and we will leave for future generations. And at Reep, we're committed to the necessary learning, relationship building that goes along with reconciliation. So if you're unfamiliar with Reep, we're an environmental charity. We've been around since 1999. We were founded out of the University of Waterloo and the Elora Environment Center. And in short, we help people live sustainably and reduce their impact on the environment and adapt to climate change using energy efficiency, water conservation, and waste reduction, among other things. I alluded to this earlier. This is one of the programs that we run in partnership with the City of Guelph and the other cities that you see at the bottom of the slide there. This is our backyard tree planting program, where you can receive the advice of an arborist on where to plant the tree, and then at a subsidized price, we will come out and plant that tree in your yard. This is really important to do because most of the trees and tree canopy, which our speakers will talk about in more depth, is located in people's yards and on private property. Certainly there's great assets like the Guelph Arboretum and parks and street trees, but a good portion of the urban canopy is on private land. So having the opportunity to consult with an arborist and to plant the right tree in the right place, please, we will encourage you to take advantage of that. I think we have a few spots left. We're almost subscribed fully for the year. But even if you're interested, we can sign up for a wait list, and we're going to be doing consultations for next spring, starting later this fall. So here's our agenda, and I won't go through this in detail, but I think we should just really kind of dive in with our speakers. So next up, what I'd like to do is introduce Judy. Judy is a member of the steering committee for Guelph Urban Forest Friends and co-founder of the Guelph-based company Urban Cottage Landscapes and Pocket Woodlands. Judy's a tree hugger, been a tree hugger from a young age. She has always been in awe of trees and recognized their importance to life as we know it on planet Earth. Judy is committed to helping increase the quantity and quality of the trees that make up our urban canopy. So I'll pass it over to you, Judy. Oh, you're on mute, Judy. And while you're doing that, I'll stop sharing my slides here so people can see you.
You would almost think I'd never been on Zoom before. Still happens occasionally. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to have you turn out tonight. And what I want to share tonight is a little bit about Guelph Urban Forest Friends, and we like to be called GUFF, G-U-F-F for short. I'll start just by reading a little blurb from our website because I think it does a pretty good job of describing what we're about and what we're up to. We are a group of citizens working through education and advocacy to maintain and increase the health, integrity, and area of Guelph's urban forest. We believe that the ecological and social benefits that trees provide offer immense value to everyone. And this is whether the trees are on public or private property. So this is how we came about. This is why we exist. We're deeply concerned about Guelph's urban forest ecosystem, and we strive to raise awareness and promote the importance of our community's trees, and their care is our top priority. We kind of have a three-pronged approach. The first is through advocacy. We advocate for city trees and urban canopy wherever we can. And this includes being a point of contact for any citizen issue that might arise that's related to trees. For example, if a homeowner or community member sees a tree being cut down and they are questioning it, they might send us an email and we will do our research and find out the who and the why, what's going on, what's behind it. Of course, always with the tree's best interest at heart. And wherever feasible, we advocate for tree preservation. So advocacy is a big part of what we do. And another approach that we use, of course, is education. So through our website, and we attend different events. We were at the Arboretum event this weekend, and we have a booth and we have flyers and information about what we are and ways that people can get involved. We do have flyers on our website that are downloadable: how to plant a tree, how to care for a tree, how to choose small native trees to plant in Guelph, or how to choose medium to large trees. So lots of information on our website, and we have links to other information on trees as well on the website. So advocacy, education, and then a third prong, as it were, is information sharing. So we try and share information as much as possible. On our website, we have principles that should guide Guelph's urban forest management, and there's a whole list of them there that you can find. That's quite comprehensive. We encourage the planting of native species that support our ecosystem and promote insect and pollinator diversity. And we share what kinds of native trees can be planted in Guelph for optimal health and urban sustainability. As part of our information sharing, we also host urban forest stewardship meetings. They're quarterly meetings. And it's to connect other groups in Guelph and other organizations with an interest in trees and promoting and preserving environmentally friendly and sustainable Guelph. So this also includes staff from the City of Guelph and neighborhood groups, quite a diverse collection actually of organizations. The meeting together like this, it gives us an opportunity to share various events that we have going on or planned. Helps to avoid too much overlap amongst the different groups. And more importantly, it helps us partner with each other and support one another, because before we started having these meetings, we found that different groups around the city were often siloed, and we didn't know what each other was doing. We didn't even maybe know the other groups existed. So this is great because we all have common interests and goals at heart. And it's really helpful if we can all sort of be on the same page and be moving things forward in the same direction and be connected. So that's a really important aspect that we just started doing during COVID, really. Another thing that we do is we have awards. This is also to raise awareness and, again, visibility. We have 2 annual awards. One is to recognize a community member who has demonstrated passion and dedication to tree stewardship in Guelph. And this one is called the Henry Koch Stewardship Award, in honor of Henry, who was dedicated to growing, protecting, and advocating for trees. He was an extremely knowledgeable man, and he was a mentor to many. So our second award is called the Notable Tree Award. And this is for a noble tree, a tree that is cherished by the community for its heritage value and as a fine example of its species. It may have been around for many decades, and we encourage people to submit nominations for either of these awards. So if you or anyone that you know would like to put forth a nomination for either category, we welcome and encourage you to let us know, or you can use the nomination form that's on our website. And we always are looking for new members. So we welcome anyone that, if you think you might have an interest in finding a little bit more about what we do and what we're about, please have a look on our website, and we do have a form there you can submit. If you think you might be interested in getting involved in a little way, a big way, or just learning more about us. So I invite you to check out our website. Patrick, let me see. Can I paste that in the chat? I guess I can, and I see a couple of questions.
Please do, yeah.
You've got it there already. Great. Yeah, okay. So the website is Guelph Urban Forest Friends, and Patrick has put the link to the website there in the chat, I see. So, and thank you. I also see the nomination form, so that's awesome. I don't know if anybody has any.
When is there a specific time of year that you're looking for nominations? I guess that
Yeah.
could be, yeah.
So we just gave the stewardship award on Saturday at the Arboretum event. And then the Notable Tree Award will be in the spring. So May, I believe we have that. So yeah, we're looking for nominations for the notable tree. So if you know a magnificent tree or a wondrous tree, of which we have many, there's your opportunity to let us know.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Judy. As I mentioned off the top, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So hopefully you can stick around and participate in that as well. So next up, I'm going to introduce Adele Pierre, who's going to talk about trees throughout their life cycle. Adele is an award-winning landscape architect and arborist. We've had the pleasure to work with at Reep for several years now. Mindful of the effects of climate change on our natural systems, Adele incorporates native plantings into all of the projects that she designs that include both new and existing trees at various stages of their development. Adele's knowledge extends to the role of native plants, shrubs, and trees as habitat for pollinators, building healthy soils, and managing rainwater to reduce flood risk in our cities. Adele, do you want to take over? And I understand you have a slide presentation. Oh, you're way ahead of me. Perfect.
There. Good evening. It's a delight to be with you and talk about one of my absolute favorite topics. I have lots of favorite topics, but if you're going to do anything for the environment, one of the best things you can do is plant a tree and keep it healthy. So there are quite a few little sections, as you can see here. We're going to talk about the benefits of trees. And then we're going to talk about some of the limiting factors in choosing trees. You can't always get what you want. Sometimes you have to choose carefully. We're going to talk about the best planting practices. At that point, there'll be a little bit of a break for questions, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. And then we're going to spend a fair bit of time just talking about the ongoing care. Do you need to fertilize them? Do you need to prune them? What needs to happen with them? So that's a lot of stuff. It's not an incredible amount of time. So, and I have a problem with talking too much. So I'll try to limit myself to the half hour. And some of this stuff I'll go through rather quickly because any one of these topics is quite extensive. But I'll touch on many things and spend a little bit of time, more time on others. One of the key things that trees do in the city is moderate temperatures. Everybody knows that. All you have to do is go to a parking lot in the middle of the summer, and people are heading for the shaded parking spots because it's just stinking hot to be on that pavement. So this picture was taken with an infrared camera in Australia, but it could be anywhere. Canada, US, Nepal, could be anywhere in the world. You can see the difference in temperature between the pavement, 45 degrees, and under the trees, 25 degrees Celsius. The interesting thing about this is you just think about your downtown for a moment. Think about downtown Guelph and the amount of paved surface that is there and the amount of trees that there are. Not a heck of a lot of trees, but a lot of pavement, a lot of stone buildings. So all of this heat starts to build up and we end up with something that's called the heat island effect. So our cities, our temperatures are getting warmer and our cities are getting hotter, and that causes a lot of stress for people. So trees moderate the temperatures in two ways. One is that they actually shade the pavement. The other is that they absorb water through their roots. They transpire it through the leaves. So they end up being massive air conditioners. So they do a lot for our cities by moderating the temperatures, making it an easier place to live. If you are thinking about planting for shade at your house, there are a couple of strategies that you can adopt. You should go on the east or west side of the house. That's the most strategic, 10 to 30 feet away from the building. You never want a tree too close to a building. If it's too far away, it's not going to shade your house. Deciduous trees are amazing because they'll give you shade in summer. and then you get the sunlight in winter. And I love this little graphic because it has a couple of really key strategies for energy saving that will make a difference in your house. One that people often don't think about, and I forgot about in our house until we got a new air conditioner, is shading the AC unit. If there is shade on that unit, it can operate much more efficiently. You're using a lot less energy in your house. If it's in the blazing sun, that thing is working overtime. You can block the winter winds with evergreen trees on the north side of the house. So that's not going to cause any shade in the winter, but it's certainly going to block the winds, again, creating energy saving for your house. Vines over driveways, vines over the patio. There's a lot of different strategies, but I would encourage you to just take a look at this graphic and think of how just on your property, you can increase the amount of shade in our cities. If you want a very light shade, you can plant something like the honey locust, very dappled shade, lovely. If you want dense shade, then you're looking at something like an oak or a maple, something with a big leaf. So just a couple of considerations. Health effects, especially clean air trees, have a significant effect on the quality of air. Significant. I love this study that was done on ash trees when somebody had the brilliant idea that when ash emerald borer hit, they should track the differences in respiratory disease. And you can see it had a significant difference. Now, this is not just one random study. In 2010, the City of Hamilton did a major study that was sponsored primarily by the local newspaper, Hamilton Spectator. It was called Code Red. And they looked at health outcomes in different areas of the city. And there is a direct correlation between those parts of the city that have low canopy, hardly any trees, and higher respiratory disease, higher hospital admissions for heart, lower birth rates for babies. The health outcomes are astonishing when linked to trees. It's been documented for many decades now that just looking at greenery and looking at trees lowers blood pressure. Physicians are recommending, rather than drugs, walks in a park to lower stress, to lower blood pressure. It's been well documented that patients in a hospital that can see a tree outside of their window recover faster from surgery. So trees have a major effect on the health, well-being, and happiness of people. Habitat. One of the most concerning things in the news for me is the loss of species. So many species that are going extinct. Judy mentioned something about native trees. The native trees support the native species. So this is a cedar waxwing. I can vouch for the fact that it loves service berries because we have 6 service berries on our property and we never get one. The cedar waxwings eat them all while they're still green. We also have some buckthorn, which Patrick mentioned, which is an invasive shrub. Growing up, I keep trying to get rid of it. Cedar waxwings don't touch them. They don't eat those berries. So trees provide an immense amount of habitat for many, many, many species. I'm not going to talk about a lot of different trees in this presentation. That's a different kind of presentation, but I will put in a plug for this native tree, the hackberry tree. It's not a very glamorous name, but it's a wonderful tree. It's got an elm-like form, an elm-like leaf, and it has these berries on them, which are edible for birds, for any kind of species, including humans. Sometimes it's not planted because it gets this little bump on the leaves. This is a bacillus. It's a little habitat for a tiny bug. It does absolutely no harm to the tree. It does absolutely no harm to anybody else. But this is a marvelous, fast-growing tree that provides food. If you want to really make a difference in terms of habitat, you'll want to plant one of these trees. These are called the keystone tree species, and these are the ones that are key for our region. Keystone means that they provide the most eco benefits. And I think you'll recognize all of these species. These trees feed 90% of all species of caterpillars. Caterpillars are important because they're kind of the bottom of the food chain. All of the birds feed on them. They also turn into moths and butterflies, those amazing pollinators. If you're going to plant one tree, only one tree in your lifetime, you might plant an oak. So the white oak is a host plant for 436 caterpillar species. All of the oak species in North America, it is estimated that they provide habitat for just under 1,000 species. Truly astonishing. So these are the stars of trees. If you want to do something for the ecosystem and you want to do something to preserve species, plant one of these trees. Now, this is what I particularly love, stormwater management. Toronto's tree benefits estimated at over 81 million, with 66% of the value coming from the trees' role in managing stormwater. This was a study done by TD Economics in 2013. Also in 2013, there was a study that came out from the Insurance Bureau of Canada saying, we can't manage stormwater the way that we have up until now. We've got too much flooding, too much destruction of infrastructure. We need to be planting trees and providing green infrastructure. You know, when conservative organizations like the banks and the insurance companies are saying, we can't manage this way anymore, we need trees. We're not just talking tree huggers anymore. This is serious business. So this tree is a lovely little example because look, it's connected to storm drain. So the water is going straight into this tree pit and this tree is absorbing storm water. This slide, once again, to look at what is written in red. Unfortunately, healthy mature trees provide the most benefits, but unfortunately, many trees in urban areas never make it to this stage. The sad fact is the average tree lifespan in an urban setting is 10 years. That's nothing. A short-lived tree such as a birch, short-lived 90 years. If you look at oaks, they can live hundreds of years if they are well taken care of. So we need to start thinking about how we can take care of these trees and bring them to maturity. Let's take a look at the City of Guelph and a few details about their canopy cover. So there's an overhead view. You can see what the city looks like. An earlier study, I think it was done in 2012, 2013, said that the goal of the City of Guelph was to have 40% coverage of canopy over the urban area by 2032. There was an urban forest study report done in 2019. And at that point, 4 years ago, the canopy cover was 23.3%. The ecosystem benefits to that, what it is saving the city in stormwater management fees, undoubtedly, is 5.6 million per year. Now, they are trying desperately to plant trees, but when we have ice storms, many of those trees are taken down. When we have things like emerald ash borer or oak wilt or Dutch elm disease, we are losing a lot of trees. So the planting needs to happen. And if you take a look at the center of Guelph, right in the middle, you can see there's not a lot of tree canopy there. I remember talking to an urban forester from the City of Guelph, and she said, I would love to plant trees in the downtown, in the core of Guelph, but I have nowhere to put them. The sidewalks are narrow. The buildings are close to the sidewalks. There's not a lot of area between to plant. Underneath, there's all kinds of infrastructure, fiber optic cables, gas lines, oil lines, you name it, telephone lines, it's all down there. So really, it's up to people like us in our own neighborhoods to increase that tree canopy. Mature trees provide the most benefits. When they did this study in 2019, they found that 42.6 of the trees in Guelph were in the smallest class size. So we're talking like a trunk of maybe 4 inches, not doing a lot of good. 1% in the largest class size. And those are the big ones, that the trees of note that would be, say, 2 feet across, 61 centimeters, but only 1%. I used to tell people to buy a small tree and put it in, and it would catch up quickly. I've changed my tune. Now I'm saying buy the biggest tree you can afford, put it in carefully, plant it carefully, and take care of it, because we need more mature trees planted. There are a number of limiting factors in choosing a tree. The hardiness zone, whether you're in sun or shade, your soil texture, the soil pH, whether the soil's wet or dry, and the size. As a designer, that's why it's in full. Size, to me, size really matters. Plant hardiness zones, it's easy to find out what your plant hardiness zone is. And every time you go to the nursery, you look at the tag and it will tell you the hardiness zone that plant can manage. It refers to the coldest that it can manage. You should also take note of where you are. So for instance, I'm out in the country, out on the Haldeman clay plain. We bought a place that was literally horse pasture, and I've been planting like mad, but it's still very open. So even though technically our zone would maybe be 5B or 6A, which is relatively warm, I plant stuff that's hardy in zone 4, much colder. Whereas my neighbor, they've been in their place for 60 years, lots of tree breaks. They can plant stuff that is much more sheltered. So they've got a little bit more wiggle room. But do pay attention to that. If you're planting a Japanese maple, be careful. Do you have sun or do you have shade? The big trees mostly like full sun. Primarily, they like full sun because those are the ones that are at the top of the forest. They're reaching out to the sun. If you're looking for something that will grow in shade, you're probably looking at an understory tree, and I'll give you an example of a few of those later. But very important that you know, if a plant requires full sun, that means 6 hours of full sun every day. Partial sun, that's the one in the middle, 4 hours probably. Shade, well, maybe 2 hours. Deep shade, you're really taking your chances on that one. Soil texture is important. Sand, silt, and clay, of course, any soil is a mixture of those three, but it will be primarily one or the other. So sandy soil, everybody knows what sand is like. The beach, sandy soil has the biggest texture. You can feel it. It's gritty. It has amazing drainage, amazing. Again, you know that from when you were a kid. You build a moat at the beach, you put the water in, you pour it in with your pail, it disappears. Great drainage. It also drains nutrients. It doesn't hang on to them well. So if you've got sandy soil, you're going to have to give your tree a little bit more TLC, in other words, a little bit more compost to add those nutrients. If you've got clay, that's the other end of the spectrum. The clay particles actually kind of look like those cracks up there. They're called platy. They're microscopic and they're flat and they sit on top of each other and they really stick together. And it's hard to work. I have clay soil, and there are about 2 weeks when you can actually cultivate it. Apart from that, it's a little bit like cement. So that's the bad news, but the good news is clay soil hangs on to nutrients. So once your plants are in there, they're not going anywhere. They're very happy. Silty clay is somewhere in the middle. It's a little bit like talcum powder, and it's the most highly erodible of the soils. pH. I know this may sound a little bit like your science class, but you know, these are kind of important things. Neutral pH is 7. Acidic soil is below that. Alkaline soil is above that. I mention this because, you know, if you live on alkaline soil, which is most of southern Ontario, right? The Niagara Escarpment is pure limestone. And you want to grow rhododendrons, you're going to have a lot of trouble. If you want to grow blueberries, you're going to have a lot of trouble. If you want to grow blueberries up north, happy as can be. The base rock there is granite. The soil is acidic. There are a lot of native plants like sweet gum and liquid amber and a couple of others that I would love to plant here. But I just know that if I plant them, they're going to look chlorotic. They're actually not going to be able to take up iron. So different kinds of soil, the acidic soil and the alkaline soil, lock up nutrients that your plant needs. It's very easy to find out your soil pH. You can find a kit anywhere. You can get a meter on Amazon that will tell you what the pH of the soil is, but it's certainly worth knowing. Is your soil wet or is it dry? If it's dry, you just water like mad. If it's wet, constantly wet, there are only a few trees that are going to grow on that. The rest of them are literally going to drown. But some trees are extremely well adapted. And these are some of them. Some of the maples do extremely well in the wet soils. Size matters. If you've got a big tree under a hydro line, they are going to prune it for you. Pick something. Plant the right tree in the right place. Here are a couple of small native trees that everybody should take note of, and they'll fit beautifully under a hydro line. Serviceberry, pagoda dogwood, Cercis canadensis, redwood, or I'm on a one-woman campaign to get this tree planted more, the hop hornbeam, absolutely beautiful. If you're in any doubt as to what a tree requires, I would encourage you to go to the Ontario Tree Atlas. It's online. It will give you tons of information on the planting needs and the requirements of the trees that you might be looking for. Quickly through these best planting practices. If you have fruiting trees, please don't plant them next to a sidewalk. This is a sidewalk right outside the Festival Theatre in Stratford at 11 p.m. People were sliding over this all the time, total hazard. If you've got a large tree like a black walnut, it can't be near a parking lot or sidewalks. So anything that drops fruit, please keep it away from pedestrian areas. Don't plant next to a fence. Everybody likes to do that. Keep them 5 feet away because trees will grow through the fences. It's not good for the trees. It's not good for the fences. And if it is close to the fence, your neighbor is within their rights to chop half of it off. Your tree's not going to be beautifully mature if it's in half. Plant a minimum of 20 feet from existing trees. Just watch how close you've been. Another little example, this is an 18-inch pathway. This is a redbud planted 2 feet away from it, which is going to grow 15 feet by 15 feet. This is a white pine planted 2 feet on the other side of the pathway, which is going to grow 30 feet wide and probably 40 feet tall. Neither of those lovely native trees will make it to maturity. And when I talked about the high pH, that's what your trees are going to look like if they can't absorb iron. Plant for diversity. If there are a lot of one kind of tree on your street, plant something else. Dutch elm disease, all of our elms have been wiped out. Emerald ash borer, most of our ashes have been wiped out. Oak wilt, that one is coming. It's tragic. So the more diversity we have, the more chance we'll have to maintain canopy. Can we take just a moment if there are any questions so far?
No questions yet, but just a reminder to folks to use the Q&A function if you do have questions. And you can submit those at any time.
So I want to take a few minutes with this on how to plant a tree. So this may be a little boring, but it's probably the most important thing of the evening. First of all, your planting hole. It should only be as deep as the root ball of the tree that you are planting, but it should be 2 to 3 times as wide. The root ball should sit on compacted soil. If you dig that out and put some nice loam in there, the tree is going to settle and be below the surface of the soil. You must remove the containers, the wrapping, the burlap, the wire as much as possible to expose that root ball. The most important thing is the trunk flare. That is where it meets the soil. And there's always just a bit of a swelling there. The tree should never be planted lower than the soil that it is in the container. So this is deceptive. This is mulch up here. It should be at the same level. If it sinks down, if it's covered up, that's actually just about the quickest way to kill a tree. When you backfill, don't use new soil. Use the native soil. If you put in, again, your beautiful garden loam, you think you're doing a nice thing for the tree, you're not. It's never going to leave that little cocoon. The roots need to go out into the soil. We need to encourage the roots to spread out. So resist the temptation to add a lot of stuff to that hole. Just put the stuff back in. Mulch to keep down the weeds, but also to keep the soil temperature down, because bare soil is very hot and that's going to affect your tree growth. So 2 to 4 inches of mulch, and keep it back from the roots of the trees. The mice will love you if you put it right up there. They'll have a nice place to gnaw on the tree, on the roots. You only stake if necessary, if it's in a windy spot. So again, a nice bowl for the base, for the ball of the tree, fill with native soil, mulch, and stake only if necessary. And one of the most important things is to, I missed that, it's coming up, is to water. If you have a container grown tree, oh man, those things have been pampered. They're just living in there in the most beautiful loam. The problem is if they're in there for a long time, the roots start to go round and round and round and round and round. They start to girdle the pot. You need to be brutal. Pull them apart, cut them if you have to, bring all those roots out again so they're pulling out and ready to go out into the soil. If you don't, you will have girdled roots just like this, and they will slowly but surely choke the tree. If it's in a ball, burlap, wire basket, those are field-grown trees, which are great. They generally are more expensive and they're bigger trees. This one's placed beautifully. Do you see how it's sitting on the level of the soil? Now they need to unwrap this and pull back that burlap as much as possible. One of the issues with these is if they're in burlap and also in a wire basket, sometimes if you take all of that off, the whole root ball falls apart. If it looks like that's going to happen, you can leave the bottom half of this stuff, but try to get rid of this as much as possible, and then water like mad. So I've had people say, oh, okay, we don't need to water. There's been a lot of rain happening, or it's going to rain in 3 days. That's not the issue. It's not that the tree needs water. It's that when you dig up the soil, now there are all kinds of air pockets in the soil, and the air pockets are going to dry out the roots. So those air pockets need to be filled with water, and the water is going to bring soil back in so all of the roots stay nice and wet and damp and happy and healthy. Most of the tree roots that are feeding are within the top 6 inches to 1 foot of soil. They're not deep in the ground. The ones deep in the ground are structural, holding it in place. So resist the temptation to do this. This is a terrible thing to do for a tree. You may think it looks nice, but it's terrible. Keep everything at grade and let those roots be clean and clear. Should you fertilize new trees? No. Every once in a while, I'll say, okay, maybe you could add a transplant fertilizer, which is sort of very low, 15% for the roots, but generally, no, they don't need any fertilization. Yes, if an established tree shows deficiencies. So if it's browning early, if it's yellowing, if the fruit is stunted, if the leaves are stunted, and what you want to do then in that instance is contact a qualified arborist. They will assess what the deficiency is. They'll take a soil test. They'll prescribe what needs to be done, and they will do the treatment. Fertilizing trees is not something that should be done at a whim. It's something, usually the soil is rich enough to feed the trees. The trees go far enough in the soil. If you're using compost regularly in your soil and good planting practices, there are a lot of fungal networks in the soil, and the trees gather nutrients from that. So you shouldn't have to be putting in tree stakes and spikes to feed your plant. Pruning principles, 3 reasons to prune. And this is one of the most important practices. You're going to remove any dead or damaged wood. You're going to remove diseased wood, and you're going to remove crossing branches. So if we look at the bottom, you're going to remove the girdling roots on young trees. If you have girdling roots on older trees, call an arborist, they'll cut them off. Remove the low branches gradually to provide clearance. Be careful you don't prune the tree too high up in your effort to just get that canopy up there. One of the practices that is changing with climate change is we're trying not to get those trees to go way up high. We're trying to keep them a bit more compact, so when the winds come, they're not swaying back and forth. They're more secure on the ground. You're going to remove branches that might rub against each other and cross, because they will actually cause open wounds, and that's where disease can get in. Water sprouts should be removed. Remove branches having a narrow angle attachment. Do you see that? A branch like that is going to fall off easily. You're going to remove crowded branches, branches that are malformed, and especially a competing leader. You want one going to the top. So essentially you've got, we call this a good scaffolding. So just think of what a scaffold looks like. You've got the trunk, one here, 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 and all of the branches are going outwards, keeping the inside of the tree able to receive sunshine, able to receive air, good circulation. If you can prune it when it's on the ground, go nuts. Do it yourself. If you have to get on a ladder, call an arborist. There is a reason their insurance is so high. It's because it's dangerous. Remember I talked about competing leaders? So I always show my failures. Why not? You know, I'm a landscape architect. I have a diploma in horticulture, and I'm an arborist, and I paid absolutely no attention to the sugar maple that I planted. Look at this mess. And the trunk is split down the middle, so much so that we had to put a brace right through it, drilled right through there. And it's fine for now, but at some point, that tree is going to fail because it wasn't properly pruned right at the beginning. Here's a little graphic showing how to remove the branches. If you try to do one cut here, this branch is going to shear off, and it's going to take all of this bark off. So we start with one cut here, another cut there to take the major part of the branch off, and then the third one here. Never right against the bark, always after this, just little bulge. And I have a maintenance schedule, and this comes from a website called, and you should write this down, Trees Are Good. It's maintained by the International Society of Arboriculture, specifically for homeowners. And they have what they call a user manual for people who have trees. So the type of care, when you are planting, you fill the planting hole with water. You mulch 2 to 4 inches away from the trunk. You protect the trunk as needed. I would always put those plastic things around a young tree the first couple of winters, or the rabbits are going to go nuts over it. Stake only if it's absolutely necessary. You don't need to clean the root collar. Remember where that flare is, where you plant. You should check for the encircling roots. We talked about that. You prune it rightly for good structure. And then you start to look at 1 to 3 years, 4 to 10 years, and 10 plus years. Water spring and fall, spring to fall for the first 3 years. Very important. and a long soak, not at a high intensity. So put the hose on low and let it go. The mulch, you're going to check and adjust that. You can start to plant ground cover plants around the tree at this point. They're not going to interfere with it. Just don't put any shrubs close to it. Watch for the trunk, check for damage. If there are, my brain's starting to go. If there's damage on the trunk, like a gap or a split, you're going to cut away any dead wood. It will heal. Stake again, only after 2 years, you're going to remove any stakes. You shouldn't need them after that. This clean the root collar, that's the root flare where it meets the ground. I would check that absolutely every year. So we planted a beautiful flowering dogwood at a home 3 years ago. There was construction done on the house the following year. When I went back to check the tree, they dumped all kinds of soil there, and there was 6 inches on top of the root ball of that tree. We had to pull it away. So this is something that you should watch for constantly. Pruning, the major prunings, 4 to 10 years, every 3 years. After 10 years, the deciduous every 5 years. Evergreens, they don't really need to be pruned. But I would put a little addendum in there. You can always prune lightly. Dead or diseased wood should be taken out whenever you see it. Crossing branches should be taken out whenever you see it. But in terms of major structure, take a look at it in the winter. That's the best time. You can see what's happening. Put a piece of colored yarn on those branches that need to go. If you can reach it, do it yourself. If you can't, call an arborist and they'll do it. Safety is another concern. If there are any branches that look like they are going to fall, or if they are dead, please get rid of them if they're anywhere near people where people are going to be. Very important that human safety is number one. And on that note, if we're looking at aged and dead trees, treat them with dignity because they provide habitat for a wide variety of species. This is a very old willow. All these branches that you see are surrounding maples. There's only a few leaves on this willow at the very top, but this incredible trunk is like an apartment complex for hundreds of animals, all kinds of animals. Now, if it looked like it were in danger of falling and it were near a path or near a house, I would say take it down. If it's at a distance, the longer you can leave a tree up, the better it will be for you and for the environment. And if you can save some fallen logs, leave them in your garden. It provides also a lot of habitat for a lot of animals. And in closing, plant for the future. If you plant a beech tree like this, you are not planting for yourself. You're planting for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. Choose a tree wisely, plant it carefully, nurture it lovingly for at least 10 years, and it will reward you and future generations with major benefits, not least of which is its spectacular beauty. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Adele. I think we'll hold the questions for a minute. We do have, there have been some that have come in that, and hopefully you can stick around and answer as many as possible. But I think this is a perfect segue to bring Catherine into the conversation because the program that she's coordinating, the Guelph Tree Trust, talks about extending the life of those mature trees. So let me introduce Catherine. Catherine Goddard is a longtime gardener and naturalist who has recently retired and returned to Guelph. Before Catherine retired, she ran a design and gardening service for clients in Toronto. She led a team that cared for properties with large and demanding perennials, trees, and shrubs. And as co-coordinator of the Guelph Tree Trust chapter, she is glad to have found such a wonderful group of volunteers to join who loves trees as much as she does. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, Adele. I thumbs up on everything you've said. I certainly appreciate your very concise approach to planting trees. It's a very complex subject that you managed to give all the highlights of, I believe, anyways, from my experience, in a very short time. So thank you for that. It's a hard act to follow. I would like to introduce you to Guelph Tree Trust. As most of you know, probably there are many wonderful environmental and tree groups in Guelph, led by volunteers, and with much support from Guelph. A small group of us got together last year to form a new group in town called Guelph Tree Trust. We are the 7th chapter of Tree Trust, one of which is run by Reep in Waterloo, which was founded by the Aurora Environment Center. We are the only group in town, indeed the province, that focuses on the health and preservation of large urban legacy trees. We raise funds to engage highly skilled specialists and highly trained arborists to do conservation pruning and other work to ensure the trees live out their full life. We also support the preservation and safety of old urban trees that are threatened often by building projects or other human disturbances and environmental stresses and disease. That, of course, we do along with many other groups in Guelph. As well, we offer opportunities to offset your carbon footprint. Your donations go towards protecting the magnificent carbon capture heroes, each an important part of our tree canopy, making contributions, environmental contributions equal to that of 250 saplings. And as Adele pointed out, there's very few of them indeed in our urban settings, that each one is important. On a chilly, drizzly day in April, our Guelph Tree Trust group held our first event at Woodlawn Memorial Park. We had chosen a large native black walnut. It's huge, actually, estimated to be about 100 years old, and perhaps as old as the cemetery itself. Our arborist, Doug Steele of Full Circle Tree Care, had developed a detailed prescription for care of this tree, and his team climbed into the tree to begin work with a sizable crowd looking on. Seeing the arborist work at great heights is exciting to many, but be assured there are many safety checks in place, and arborists always have safety in their minds first. The prescription or program for care included reducing the weight of some of the limbs. As Rob Shaw, a member of our group, said, trees don't have the option of stopping growing. They will grow to the point that the structure isn't sufficient enough to support itself. The increasingly strong winds and other climate changes add to the stress on these venerable trees and weakened structures. The Rotary Club of Guelph South sponsored this work on the walnut. Martin Litchfield, president of this group, acknowledged that they realized that it was time for us to help out on that side of forestry, that side of climate change, helping to maintain old trees, not just planting new ones. As a postscript to the work that was done on the walnut, an insider's view, we later learned from Doug and the arborists on our volunteer team that the work done that day was limited. This was due to a discovery when aloft of a disease in the tree that might be spread by the arborists inadvertently if they wounded the tree by pruning live wood. This is evidence of the great care and knowledge that is applied by these arborists to each individual tree as they're working on it. Much like doctors, they do no harm. And in Britain, where I was just visiting, they call arborists tree surgeons. Guelph Tree Trust provides conservation care for large mature trees on non-for-profit institutional or commercial properties such as churches, schools, cemeteries, group homes, and long-term care facilities. Many of these institutions do not have the resources to care for the large trees on their property. Our work complements the care that the City of Guelph Urban Forestry Department provides for public and park trees. We offer a qualified arborist advice on the health and maintenance of older trees on private property in return for a donation to Guelph Tree Trust. I think that's unique in the Tree Trust chapters. I'm pleased to announce, excuse me, I'm pleased to announce here that our second tree event will take place on October 14th. Our arborists will work on a large silver maple that resides close to Water Street on the property of the Muslim Society of Guelph, where two schools operate, the Mizan School and the Montessori Academy. The tree shades the Montessori Academy Learning Center's playground area and is an important signpost for the whole property. More details will follow. Please visit us on our website, and we certainly welcome volunteers and donors. So, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And we do have a website. Can you put that up, Patrick? Thank you.
Yep, it's in the chat.
Good.
And if you do want to get in touch with Catherine or Guelph Tree Trust, I just posted the email there too, if you want to reach out to them.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah, so again, feel free to type in any questions you have for any of our presenters. Thanks for coming back there, Judy. And we'll get to these as many of we can. Before as we were planning this, Judy warned us that us tree lovers like to talk, so we went a bit over, but we'll try and get as many questions in as we can. So there's a couple questions about your presentation that you made mention of, Adele. So one was, are you able to amend the soil to address an issue with pH if the plant needs acidic, for example, but you have a basic soil? Oh, you're muted, Adele.
There, we're back. You can amend soil, but it will always revert to the native soil. So you are fighting a losing battle. So the whole ecosystem under the soil has a particular pH. It has a certain life cycle of its own. So if you're adding something to change that pH, you're affecting all of life. Now, having said that, there are some things that may help. Maybe you can put some coniferous needles on the soil to make it more acidic, but really, I would say you need to go with the pH that you've got, because nature will always win out, because that rock that is underneath the bedrock is always crumbling and always coming to the surface. And that is determining what the pH of the soil is. And in my instance, I can't fight with the Niagara Escarpment. And if you're in Northern Ontario, you can't fight with the Canadian Shield.
Great, thank you for that. Another question on, while we're in the talking about planting trees, somebody asked, do smaller trees being planted, for example, less than 2 inches in diameter, also have a trunk flare?
It's very small. So the guiding principle would be, again, to plant it at the same depth in your garden as it is planted in the container. And if in doubt, you're going to go just a little bit higher and mound the soil out. Again, the fastest way to kill a tree is to bury it too deep.
Right. And as I said, we have a wealth of expertise on our panel, so feel free to field any this question. I'm not sure if anybody has a good answer because I've only just heard about it, but is there a way to treat oak wilt is one of the questions here.
Did you want to go ahead with that? I saw you shaking your head, Catherine. I mean, my answer is the same.
Yeah, maybe for my own edification, you could just give a quick, and for others who aren't aware, what oak wilt is and what the specter of it is.
So it's a fungal disease that is showing up in Ontario. It's very difficult to treat. The best thing that you can do is keep your trees as healthy as possible. Limit your pruning to from November to, I think they say November till April. So don't prune it at all. In the summer, you don't want to open up any of those wounds to any kind of chance to be invaded by the fungus. If it's already suffering from wilt, you can call an arborist. They might have a fungicide, but chances are not good for it. The best thing is to try to keep it as healthy as possible. Yes, Catherine, you may have more info on that.
I've been to a session about oak wilt, and I would absolutely suggest that people, if they suspect their tree is suffering from oak wilt, that they contact the Center for Invasive Species Center in Ontario. They're running the whole program connected to the federal government, and they will send out, if going through a number of checks, if they suspect it is a case, that they'll come out and they will deal with the tree. And as I understand it, there is no viable treatment for oak wilt. But I also understood from this seminar that it is a disease that's been going for a long time in the US, since the 1930s or even earlier, and that it has been managed so that not all oak trees are assigned, certain death, not like the emerald ash borer, which is a physical thing that, just ate through the whole group of ashes. This is a disease. It's carried by an insect that has a beetle that has a limited range, which is also a good thing, and that they consider that when they come and do an assessment on the tree. They do DNA testing and so on to confirm the oak wilt is actually present. So it's a pretty serious thing, but it can be contained. And one of the several things that we can all do is not to move any wood, particularly oak wood, and certainly don't use it as firewood. And that has to be, human intervention has to be the reason for why it's shown up near Georgian Bay as well as Niagara on the lake. It can't have moved that far by these insect vectors. So it's something that we need to be aware of, and it particularly affects red oaks. So we're watching at the top of red oaks for early browning and leaf drop at the top. Not that other things can't cause that somewhat too, but if you suspect, you should contact this center, Invasive Species Center. And I don't think, actually, I've heard some arborists who need to get better informed, I'm afraid, about it, because they really are in no position to treat it or cut branches, or as you suggest, that's absolutely key as well. So we need to keep these trees healthy. Yeah.
And I know because of that, they're avoiding doing any pruning of oaks sort of outside of basically the winter months. So I know that's one way around it, because as Adele sort of pointed out, you do need to maintain these trees, but that the risk is greatest in those sort of spring through fall months. There's also I'd noticed that Joseph is in the chat piping up as well. He's a arborist who's done this type of work, so he's got some tips there too. So on the topic of invasives, there's a question about how to identify invasive trees. The example they give is Siberian elm, and if there's any recommendations on how to get rid of them is what they said. But yeah, how would you deal with invasives? And I know that's really differs from specifics, but maybe talk in generalities, and feel free to use some examples too.
I can speak to that. I'm living right next to a whole row of them. And they're small-leafed elm and very fast-growing, still sold as hedging material. And the one that's behind me all the way along, over 100 feet tall, not very big girth for most of these, has, I figured, been there maybe 30, 35, at most 40 years. And they're that tall. They are invasive in the sense that they have samra, millions of them, that fly all over the place and root almost always. So there's a number of problems with Siberian elm, and in my opinion, they shouldn't be sold as hedging, because if you do plant a hedge, you'll have instant coverage, but they grow 4, 6, sometimes 8 feet a year. So they need to be cut down to your wanted 6 feet at least 2 or 3 times a year. My parents in Guelph had one hedge that my dad finally gave up on and got rid of. And the way to get rid of it, while it's fairly small, is to get an arborist in and just do a whole row of stump grinding, because they do sucker back as well, but they're a problem. One of, I'm afraid, many that we face here in the urban environment. So yeah, it's a very tricky thing. They also are very weak wooded and tend to drop a lot of branches too, so they can be dangerous. Siberian elm, gotta love them.
Yeah, lots more questions. Perhaps we can take some of these away, and I can indulge our speakers to circulate them, and we can reply to them afterwards, just in the interest of time here. But I will take a couple more here. There's a question about mulching, which I think the answer might be different depending, again, at the stage of development of the tree. But there's a question about whether creating a donut of mulch around a tree is actually helpful. And the alternative suggestion is to mulch, do a thin layer of mulch around the tree. And is that actually more beneficial?
I would say that the only thing you should not do is the mulch volcano, where the mulch is mounted up against the trunk. You just don't want mulch mounted against the trunk. Apart from that, I don't think it makes a bean of difference. I've done every conceivable kind of mulch, and not mulch on my property because I'm incredibly lazy. And it doesn't seem to make a heck of a lot of difference. You just need to keep it away from the trunk, and please do not mound it up. It's heartbreaking to still see those mounds of mulch against the trees.
Okay. Just take one more question, and I might put you on the spot, Judy, because I think this one speaks to advocacy and some of the city's tree canopy targets. Feel free to, again, to speak specifically to that or in generalities. The question is talking about how the City of Guelph has set a 40% canopy target by 2032. What are the anticipated costs to maintain the trees? Because that's not just planting new trees, obviously. If there's any advocacy that can be done around sort of making sure that the budget is built into making sure that these trees do get maintained and that those canopy goals, we can strive towards those.
Unmute myself there. Sure. Yeah, it is definitely a challenge that needs to be addressed. I would say that caring for the trees by way of watering is probably one of the most important things that we can do. And I know that there are always budgetary constraints. I think we need to reprioritize where we need to put our dollars, because as we all know, trees are key, really, really important. So as you mentioned, it's not just the cost of maintaining them, but when they die, and as we see that happens quite frequently, there's basically all the money that's been invested in that is gone, and then you've got to pay to have it taken out, and then you've got to pay to get a new one and put it in. So it's just over and over and over. And although it is a budgetary outlay at the start, by designating and making that sort of a budget area that doesn't get cut, that's in the long run, it's way more cost savings. So I think we just have to really, promote that awareness that in effect, it is the way to go, is really the only way to go if we want to increase the canopy. And that target may not even be realistic, but we got to keep pushing, working towards it.
Yeah, great. I think that's another great opportunity to put in another plug for Tree Trust, who your donations go to extend the life of those legacy trees in our community, especially in those areas where we have a lot of people gathering in schools, churches, and long-term care homes, and those types of properties that the Tree Trust looks after.
Could I just
go ahead, Catherine? Yeah.
One quick comment. We have just become aware of a program in another city as Tree Trust. We're focused on the older trees that do a lot of the canopy work with fewer numbers. And as we know from Adele's presentation and many others, that most of these trees are actually on private property. So that's a problem, and we at the moment aren't supporting those trees. But in Burlington, they have a program, it's just started, where a tree might be threatened, and the owner might want to cut it down, but they are refused by the city the permit to cut this tree down. So that's a big opportunity for Tree Trust or the city in this case to support that owner, private owner, in maintaining the tree, so that they would get a specialized arborist in and get a grant after they've been refused the opportunity to cut down the tree, get a grant from the city to maintain it so that it does live out a longer life, this big old tree. So that sounded very promising to us, and I think Guelph will be not long behind in adopting something like that. I hope in the tree bylaw discussion, perhaps. Anyways.
Yeah, very interesting. I think we got the subject for our next webinar there. So I think we'll leave it there. There's some more questions, as I said, but we'll try and get to those later. I want to thank everybody again, all of our presenters, Judy, Catherine, and Adele. Great conversation, great presentations. Once again, thank you to City of Guelph for providing funding today. And especially thanks to everybody who registered and came and stuck around listening to us drone on. So hopefully people got some good takeaways out of that. So Thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon. We will have the recording posted in a couple days, and we'll send you an email so you can rewatch it or share it with whoever you like. So thanks again, and we'll talk to everybody soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.